B2B companies are trying really hard at marketing, but not getting the desired results. Can you pick up a couple of points? What are the commonalities you're seeing when the marketing fails?
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of the problems I see are just a little bit too unfocused in terms of what they're trying to achieve. My advice to most marketers these days is learn to translate between these different groups and learn to be empathetic to what they need to see the value of marketing. Because if they don't see the value of it, you won't get your budget next year. Trying to put every point you possibly can on the homepage, probably not so good, because people think, well, now I thought I understood what you did and now I'm halfway down the page and actually I'm not sure anymore.
So being a marketer, people like your customers, they normally have a marketing problem. They come to you solve marketing problem. So what is your favorite way or process to solve their marketing problems?
Well, I mean, how long is a piece of string? There are so many problems. It depends where people's starting point are. If you introduce AI across the whole organization, in terms of demystifying it, is probably the biggest win.
But did you think AI will be able to replace our creativity? A lot of B2B companies are doing all the right things, posting online, refreshing the website, pushing campaigns, but the results still don't show up. And it's frustrating because the effort is there. The clarity just isn't. That's where today's guest, James Bridgman, does his best work. James runs Standout Consulting, where he helps B2B companies take complicated technical products and turn them into simple, powerful stories that the decision makers actually get, especially the CFO. Through his strategic sprints, fractional CMO support, and hands-on consulting, he helps teams sharpen their positioning, rebuild their marketing foundations, and connect their story to real commercial outcomes. He has helped companies raise over $250 million, rebuild marketing teams from scratch, and brings more than 25 years of experience in B2B. In this episode, we dig into why clarity is so rare, why websites still confuse people, and how a simple story can completely change the way a business grows. James, welcome to the Website Growth Show. I'm excited to learn standout marketing from you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's great to be here. I think, digital assets and particularly owned assets rather than other people's platforms, it's important to be able to market well using those assets without having to subjugate yourself to the whims of the algorithm.
I agree. Can we start just why you are helping businesses stand out with standout marketing?
Yeah, sure. So I think I have in the past run an agency myself, creative marketing and brand agency. But for the last 10 years, I've been advising tech businesses, scaling businesses, usually Series A to D. And I've just gone back into consulting because I felt there was a bit of a space where, although there's a lot of freelance and the fractional CMOs out there, the one thing I've always tried to focus on is how do you differentiate brands in the marketplace? And with AI coming in with the many different channels that people have to choose, I think the strategic understanding of how you differentiate yourselves is more important than it ever has before. So I think a lot of businesses are struggling, particularly in the B2B space, which I do most of my work in. And so I sort of felt that there was a really good opportunity there for me to help businesses sort of make their mark and really be a little bit more engaging than perhaps they would be if they'd just gone by the default route or followed what ChatGPT told them or whatever it is. I think if 70% of people are doing that, then everyone's going to be very similar.
Excellent. What are your couple of favorite ways to stand out or differentiate yourself when you're marketing as a business?
Yeah, so I think probably the two dimensions, I guess because of the way my business has evolved and my experience has evolved, is through creative. So through design, messaging, a video, whatever mediums it might be, but trying to be really lean into a really deep understanding of that and where its strengths are. So produce something that really is above the level that most people are able to produce. And this is not necessarily down to the tools. There's lots of fantastic AI tools now to produce all sorts of content, but it's the ability to understand what is actually good. And I think you need a certain amount of skill, training, experience to be able to spot what's really standing out in the market. Because as we've seen in the past, particularly websites, if you saw in the early 2000s that every tech company looked like every other tech company, right? And it's very much now, most AI companies look similar. If you swap the logo over of one website compared to another website, it wouldn't really make much of a difference. So I think the ability to go deep into that and then really understand What are those cultural references? What are those creative and design references that will come together in a way which is powerful is really important. I think the other thing is that I've always done is try to condense complexity into really simple messaging. So a lot of businesses now have quite complex technical products, and they're often founded by people who are deep into the technical side, and that's why they founded it. They've got some piece of technology or coding or solution which is very niche but also very powerful. But the problem with that is they get too close to the product or the service and can't take a step back and say, what does it actually mean? I think a lot of problems that I come across when I'm working with clients is they try and emphasize a whole ton of benefits that they list over all their collateral, over their website, everywhere, but they don't actually describe the outcomes for the clients. So the clients struggle to picture what the end result will be from working with this or hiring this solution, putting this solution in place. So I think it's critical to be able to put yourself in your mind of your customer or customers in order to be able to think, well, what is the outcome that they're going to want to see, that they have to imagine when they look at your product or your service?
Yeah, that's a very good, point. And you mentioned tools for this to be standout videos, content updations, and all other tools we have available. But I think most people struggle on a strategy level,
Yes.
how their service or product is solving end users' problem.
Yeah.
So how do you come up with these ideas to be really stand out? I was watching a video yesterday on a LinkedIn, a golf club, somebody shared it, and the golf club, they are doing a beer tasting, stunt. Manager is standing out in front of the golf club,
Yeah.
and the staff is throwing a beer on manager's mouth. Just a
Yeah.
15-20 second
Yeah.
beer
Yeah.
challenge. That they had on a one video 22 million views on TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is for me is a kind of coming up with a strategy, because when we started internet 20 years ago or 15 years ago, the difficult part is to find something, how to do something,
Yeah.
and the finding the tools. Now we have abundance of tools and information and everything. The
Yeah.
creativity is the biggest challenge, I think. What's
It
your
is.
experience in that?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, you say, you started 15 plus years ago. I started when the internet was only just becoming a thing. So using Dreamweaver to code websites, that sort of thing, and troubleshooting. So the fundamentals are exactly the same. Like, what's your messaging? Why should people care? So what is the great question, right? If you're in a meeting with a CEO and you keep on asking, well, so what? Why should your audience care? Why should your customers care? And I think it comes back to that. And then the creativity comes with how do you interpret that set of reasons for believing? And they have to be core to your brands. If you build out a brand which has a consistent narrative and a messaging framework that makes sense, whatever creative execution you do around that, it will be consistent, even though it looks vastly different, the messaging, and there'll be a connective thread which you've built around your brand, which enables you to be more flexible. So in some ways, you need to constrain yourself to a much simpler narrative line in order for you to be more creative. Because I think, as everyone knows, if you start with a blank piece of paper, it's the worst thing, right? So what you want to start with is a structure or a framework within which you can operate. And then you can say, okay, where are the opportunities? What have we got in terms of the direction of travel? What do we know about what's worked in the past? What our competitors are doing? All those different things. And then you have to take that and condense it into a strategy which makes sense and persist. If you've got a strategy, not everything will work. You'll come up with 2 or 3 hypotheses of we think this will work because of X and Y, but you just have to test it, keep on testing it and keep on going.
I agree.
So that's the key, really, to just iterate on that idea and try different things. I don't know if you know Darren Brown, who's like a mentalist magician over here, and he had a great program where he sort of said, right, to this guy, he said, right, I'm going to teach you all these special techniques and sort of mental tricks to be able to bet on the horses and win £1 million. And we'll give you the stake, so there's no risk to you. So this TV program followed this guy through all the way to the end, and he won £1 million. And it's amazing. How is that possible? It can't be possible. And then Darren unpacked the whole program, and they'd just done the same thing with 30 different people, but just shown the one that worked. And we were in great temptation here of looking at a video and say, that's amazing. How on earth did you do that? Must be genius. But it's not. It's either
Exactly.
there's thousands of people doing the same thing. We just happen to see the successful ones. So you have to do a lot of test and learning if you're going to give yourself a chance of really something that's going to stand out. And you have to be consistent about what your brand stands for and how it resonates with your target audience, because otherwise you'll find that you confuse the market and you've got less chance of really standing out. And some things are delayed reaction, right? So you might have a piece of content that gets picked up a year later and suddenly you can do something different with it just because of timing or because of some sort of share by an influencer or by a user at a particular event or whatever it is. So you've got to keep yourself open to that. And that means the right strategy in the right place.
I'm glad you mentioned that. This is the whole reason I started this podcast, and we are exploring these ideas, because what we experienced, there are marketing frameworks out there. There are marketing guides. Everything works, but not everything doesn't work for every business. There's no problem in the frameworks or in the marketing formulas, but the way implementation is the big thing. Maybe sometimes the timing is not right. Maybe sometimes what you are producing is not connecting. So again, every business try a few things, and sometimes few things work, few doesn't. So this is what we are exploring here as well. Okay. Many B2B companies are trying really hard at marketing, but not getting the desired results. Can you pick up a couple of points? What are the commonalities you're seeing when the marketing fails?
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of the problems I see are just a little bit too unfocused in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So they may have been told multiple messages coming through the company to the CMO or to the marketing manager. So, they might have been told by the CEO, or our only objective is revenue. And then by the head of product may be saying, well, actually, but we want to really only focus on this particular feature. And, the board may be saying something else. The CFO will say, well, you've only got half your budget this year. So I think the ability to look at the strategy and to really talk in the language of these different people and to translate, I think it's that old sort of adage, which is, you can have everything you want, but you can only have it at twice, very high price. Or you can have half the amount. If you want half the budget, you can do it twice the time. There's always going to be a trade-off, right? And I think you need the ability to be able to trade off some of these strategic priorities, because at the end of the day, it's a business decision of where you invest your time. But if you're leading the marketing function, you have to be able to articulate what those trade-offs are so that it's a decision that everyone takes, not just you. And I think a lot of the challenges are around clarity. Like if you find that if you ask people across the business how they describe your product or service, if you get 5 different answers from 5 different people, you've got to fix something first before you even start. So I think those are probably the most common things. So the 2 things, I guess, what I referred to before, which was how do you articulate your product or service in terms of outcomes, not just features and benefits? And the second thing is, are you consistent? Are you agreed? Are you aligned internally on what the product does and why it does it and what your North Star is in terms of the brand?
Brilliant idea. Regarding as you said, most companies are missing the outcome. They are more focused on features and benefits. Do you have any example where you implemented this strategy and it's changed the marketing results?
Well, certainly I think I've worked for a couple of fintechs where we've really focused quite in a lot of detail, simplifying the messaging quite a lot. A lot of the fintechs have quite deep, particularly where I've worked a lot, which is in payments and that sort of transaction-based solutions. They're often very deep into the technicalities of it, because if you're selling to a larger organization, a fintech organization, likely to be regulated, likely to have big legacy IT systems, you need to go into that at some point. But you don't need to go into that until you have those deeper conversations. You don't need to put it out on the website. It's not the starting point. You just need to give people enough confidence to trust that you've got those bases covered. So to try and simplify those messages and really talking about, so one fintech, we were really talking about here's the moment in time of where your industry is. Here's the corresponding challenge that you're going to face for you as in the client. And here's how we solve that and transform that into a different experience for your customers. And trying to really focus down on that and then break it out into basically the same message, but for different use cases. So you've got a product page, here's how the product does it. If you've got a services page, here's how our consultants address that problem and break it down and try and, and here's what people say about it, all aligned to that core message around how we transform that experience from where you are now to where you want to be and overcoming the hurdles in the middle. A lot of it is about storytelling, but setting up in a way where people can read, understand, or watch and understand the point quite quickly and easily and sort of take it on board, because they're more likely to talk to other people about it. They're more likely to talk to their colleagues or share a document or whatever if they can describe it easily in a sentence or two.
How did these changes when you made on a website or a marketing collateral change the results, the numbers?
Well, normally I think what I've found is if we've done, so the couple of ABM campaigns I've done, we've typically reduced the customer acquisition cost by around about 40 to 60% by that sort of process.
Wow.
Which is quite a difference, but probably more significant if you're particularly marketing to enterprise clients, it's actually shortening the sales cycle. So going from 12 months to 10 months is actually very significant. If you're a smaller business selling to a large business, that probably makes a bigger difference than actually any sort of revenue or conversion statistic. Because particularly for ABM strategies, you're only going after a small pool of people anyway, intentionally. And so I think it's more about how do you get people engaged quicker, get people down to those detailed discussions which have to happen faster, and how do you build trust quicker in that process.
Got it. One thing you mentioned, the outcome needs to be on a marketing collateral, which is very important. Apart from this storytelling outcomes, when you look at any business website, what are the few, big no-nos on your list when immediately you see that these things should not be on any website?
Yeah, I think for me, anything which is too generic. So I've seen a lot of websites where, because they wanted to get up and running quickly, they may have used generic, either AI generated images or stock images that I've seen elsewhere. Right. Or I've even used in the past. Right. So, 5 years before, hold on, that seems familiar. I think the thing about a lot of websites is that they are the ultimate test of how you portray a brand, because they basically usually have everything in there. Right. They have a section about the company and about the culture and the values. They have a section on who the people are there. They have a section on the product and services that you're delivering. And there has to be all stitched, and usually blogs or thought leadership content as well. So I think the quicker you can have a route through for your different audiences to find what they need really quickly, the better. So clear signposting is great. Trying to put every point you possibly can on the homepage, probably not so good, because people think, well, now I thought I understood what you did, and now I'm halfway down the page, and actually I'm not sure anymore. So I'm just going to go look at someone else.
Yeah, people don't have time, so attention span is very short. So you have to be very clear. One page should be conveying one point generally. Apart from the homepage, you have to mention a few things. So that's the general rule of thumb.
Yeah, and try and get as much of that core messaging above the fold as possible. So on that first screen that arrives.
Hero section.
Yeah, the hero.
Have you heard about Story Brand by Donald Miller? Story Brand Framework?
It does ring a bell, yeah.
So we came across 3-4 years ago. So we use it a lot. So it's a story framework. He used it how to create a page. So basically every film you watch, you spend 90 minutes or so on the films. Well, people don't have time. It's all because the films normally start with the problem. Every customer, every audience is trying to solve a problem. They're asking question in a Google, landing on your website, trying to solve a problem. On your hero section, if they can see the end result, what they want, the story starts from there, or a problem they are facing. Normally, that's how the story starts. So the hero section, story, getting in the prospect involved in a story is very, very important.
Yeah, well, I think, a good story is the way that most things should be structured if you can.
Exactly.
Whether that's, a case study You don't have to call it a case study, but it's basically a story of your customer's experience with your product. So anything like that is a lot more powerful if other people talk about you than you talking about you. So I think anything you can do in that direction is definitely a positive.
I agree. So being a marketer, people like your customers, they normally have a marketing problem. They come to you solve marketing problem.
Hmm.
So what is your favorite way or process to solve their marketing problems?
Well, I mean, how long is a piece of string? There are so many problems. It depends where people's starting point are. As I said, I think at the moment I seem to be doing a lot of work in terms of what is that messaging? What is that, what are your messaging pillars? How does it all fit together with your brand, your mission, and your sort of North Star, if you like? And how does that translate into different assets? So I'm doing a lot of work with startups on how do you get a great investor pitch deck, set up to raise money, because that's what they're looking to in the next sort of 6 months or so. Once the MVP and they've got the sufficient data to prove that point. So I think the key thing for me when people come to me, it's normally something around clarity, that they're not clear on how they get from where they are now to where they want to be. Sometimes you have to do a bit of work with them, particularly, the CEO or the founders, on is the vision where they're trying to get to realistic? Does it match with what the market actually wants and where the competition is? And you can't have all the things that you want all the time. So I'm working with one company and their main problem is, well, this technology could be applied to every industry. And what I'm trying to work with them is, you need to pick one. Let's go through. Let's evaluate how the biggest or most obvious benefit or the biggest gap in the problem that this is going to solve for which industry. And let's start there and then expand. So land and expand is a good way of doing it. And I think a lot of strategy is fine in theory, but you really have to get to that point where you test it, you survey audience. That's the other thing that sometimes provides a lot of clarity. You may think A, your assumption is A, but if you ask your customers, that may not be true. Even though how much you want it to be true, that may not be true. But I think for me, it's coming in and kicking the tires and working out, how simple can we make this message? How powerful can we make the message? And where does it need to show up? So what channels, what platforms, and what does that implicate for marketing planning, for creative, for design, for digital assets, for sales scripts, whatever it is, looking at the entire customer life cycle. What are the implications for that if we go in that particular direction?
Wow, there are quite a few, puzzles of this marketing jiggle. So when everything works together, then normally marketing works. In your opinion, a product market or product service fit, how important is that in the success of marketing?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think it's one of those fundamental pieces. I think you have to be a little bit wary in that sometimes the market isn't quite ready for what the product that you've got. You have to be really careful on how you test product market fit, because the confirmation bias and various other things, you can do some research and some testing and find out what you want to find out as opposed to what you need to find out. So I think you just got to be a little bit careful about how you test these things and be quite rigorous in terms of the methodologies you use, that sort of thing. But I do think it's better to get out there as soon as you have a viable product rather than waiting for the perfect product, and get those first tranche of users to really embrace them, and hopefully they will embrace you, so that you can really get into the weeds quite quickly in terms of what works and what doesn't work.
Interesting. And once you have a product, you think it's a marketable, you should be marketing and testing it. What is your process here to which channel should be using to test the marketing? Do you go by omni-channel, try all the channels, or do you pick and choose the channels depending on the product?
Well, I think the default these days, because there are so many channels, it's always going to be multi-channel, right? Omni-channel is usually too ambitious, well, unless you've got a huge budget and a huge team. I would always start from the point of getting those really clearly defined personas of the different buyer types and not have too many of them. So, okay, we've got 2 or 3 key buyer types that we have to engage with, and our metrics will measure how much engagement we get with those groups. So the next step is then to say, based on those buyer types. Where do they hang out? Where do they discuss things? Where do they, where's the events they go to? Where's the, whatever it is, where the digital channels they use? What's the educational resources they go to sort of keep up to date? Whatever it is, that will define which channels you go after. It doesn't matter what skills you got in the team. You have to start with the customer and work backwards. Not, I've got 3 people who do great TikTok videos, but that's great. But if none of your customers are on TikTok, then what's the point?
Exactly. So, got it. From basically the founders who are looking to improve their marketing at the moment, do you have any mindset shift that if they change, the results can be totally different?
I think for founders in particular, I think there's probably 2 elements which I try and focus on. One is be relentless in understanding your customer. Like, don't let that go. Once I know you've founded the company and you've got the technology, but be incessantly curious and fixated on what the customers are saying, to the point of doing sales calls or listening in on customer service conversations or whatever it might be. That you give a better steer of where the business is than by talking to all your teams, than actually listening to some of these customer conversations or go to events or whatever it might be. I think that's one point. Probably the other one is hire great people and trust them to do their job. Like, don't micromanage. You have a job, they have a job. There's enough to do. There's always enough to do, right? You need to hire great people and let them do their job within the parameters of the business strategy. Because I see too many founders getting stuck into HR issues and marketing issues and all these things, and not at the superficial, does this fit with business strategy, or is this going to get the results, or be curious about this stuff. It's actually, oh no, I've seen such and such work really well, so we should do that. Without any trust of the expert who's been doing it for 15 years, who understands whether that works for that context of that business or not. So those are my 2 things that I would normally try and push founders towards.
Do you have any example where you advise a founder that don't get involved with everything else and just let the people do what their job is, and it changed the marketing results?
I think it's not really, I'm not usually quite as blunt as that, to be fair. I normally try and encourage people and empower them and try and define the roles. So if I'm doing a piece of strategy, brand strategy or something with a founder, I will be very clear, okay, you need to give this piece to the marketing team so that they can go and run with it. And while we work on this other one, and you need to focus on this area. So I'm not trying to say you've done a terrible job, please rethink it. I'm just trying to say you'll get good results if you do this and you focus on this and they focus on the other thing. I think a lot of it has come around when I've been working in-house, is working quite closely with the HR director or the CHRO in terms of, how do you develop culture? How do you develop a common sense of purpose? What are the messages? How do you run internal events and internal motivations? How do you get teams to collaborate? So working with the HR and the people team actually is quite a good way to work with the CEO or the founder to sort of get them to understand that the dynamics that are going on within the business have to be approached systematically and professionally in order to make them work. 'Cause when you're 3 or 4 people or even 10 people, that's fine. That's just a group of people in a room or a pub or whatever it is. But when you get to 25, there's an inflection point. When you get to 100, there's an inflection point. And when you get to above about 200, 180 to 200 people, there's an inflection point. Because the nature of people themselves, and if you look at the different studies in terms of sort of how people interact with each other in groups, will change depending on the dynamics and the size of the group. So, we naturally have a group of about 150 people that we know reasonably well in our circle. And that is sort of the size of your small village, I suppose. And that's
Exactly.
really what makes a difference to that.
How important is positioning yourself clearly for the effective marketing results?
I think it's very clear and very important. And I think the thing about positioning is that it is all about clarity. There are so many people offering a very similar service. And I think if you're in the industry, whatever it is, you may see the nuances between yourself and the competitors. but your customers probably don't. So in order to get that real clear positioning, it does make a huge difference in terms of how you come across and the clarity of your proposition and the likelihood that people are going to buy from you.
I agree. You also, we were discussing before this podcast, you're excited about there is an underutilized marketing channel, which is partnerships. So the B2B companies can leverage partnerships massively to increase their, grow their businesses. Would you like to explain what do you mean by partnerships and how
Yeah.
companies can get benefit?
So I think people don't really realize that there's a whole channel of go-to-market that's on their doorstep that they're not utilizing. And that's often either their suppliers or some sort of a partnership or some sort of aligned business that they work with on a regular basis that will probably have access to a similar set of customers or be after a similar set of customers than you have. Actually, just to be able to sit down with them and say, hold on, there's a significant overlap here. Why don't we work together and do something different? I think there are benefits there. So I think creativity is essentially about creating and combining different ideas together into new forms. And if you're working with people who think differently to you, then that's a great way of doing it. I think that's another reason for why diversity is so good, but that's another whole other podcast. And I think the thing about partnership is you'll be able to do more with less. Often you'll be able to partner with larger companies that have a bigger reach than you, who may not be able to do what you do. So you may be more nimble than them. You may be able to do something on the street or, more on the ground with customers that they would struggle to do, or there's too much bureaucracy. So I work with a fintech, ran their global marketing, and we did a global campaign with MasterCard. But that wouldn't have existed if MasterCard had just had a normal partnership with us. So we had a partnership agreement, but that was just for the product. But then I arranged to have a meeting with the global marketing team and said, well, we've got a partnership agreement, but we're not doing anything in marketing. Tell me what you as a team, global team, struggle with, and let's see if I can, my team can help out. And so I pitched 5 or 6 ideas. They loved one of them. And it ended in a campaign that was across 31 countries. We got our brand next to MasterCard. MasterCard covered a lot of the cost, and everyone was really delighted. And it deepened that relationship that started out as just a technical product relationship to make sure our products worked together better, and became something more that was more qualitative, that everyone felt better about. And then we could go and have more discussions about different sorts of collaboration in future. So I think sometimes there's things in front of you which, are opportunities, but you just have to be open to it.
I could not agree more. So these things worked for, magic for us as well in the past. And every time, whenever we are focused, we are delivering more to our existing customers. There's always, new things you can do with them because you already have a reputation with them. There's a trust level and lots of less bureaucracy working with, existing partners or existing customers.
Yeah.
This is a very lucrative area to explore partnerships. Any ideas, any suggestions, the founders who don't know how to start looking these sort of opportunities, any ideas which worked for you, which you can share?
I think they're everywhere in a way. I think about your best customer, your best supplier, or your best collaborating organization. So who do you work alongside? What technology do you use in your platform? So for example, I know Microsoft have for small businesses, they have various pots of funding. If you're using the Azure platform in the cloud for your technology, there are various partnership programs with Microsoft which you can approach them and say, well, we're using your technology. We'd like to talk about it more. Can you help us and support us? But on a smaller level, you may be using a particular hosting company or something, and you notice that they're going to an event which is related to your target market. And you say, well, why don't we have a stand together? Or why don't we talk about how we work together on a speaking slot and try and pitch for a speaking slot? Or, do a bit of PR together or something on a particular case study. There are lots of different ways of doing it, but I think if your interests are aligned in terms of the outcome and the types of customer that you want to engage, then it makes total sense. I think it's having that openness to have those conversations and just listen to what the other side wants, not just be all about you, is probably the key factor. So it's just like okay, if I can make sure that they get a great result out of it, I'm going to get a great result out of it as well.
Fantastic suggestion and brilliant ideas, James. We are discussing how to grow a business. So we just touched upon many things, but in your expertise, in your experience, any question I should be asking you, should have asked you about growing a business, which I haven't, and you really want to share with the people who are listening?
I think probably the elephant in the room is AI, right? So I think I've been looking at a lot of what is the future of marketing with AI. And I think we'll end up more and more with an engine in the middle to do the day-to-day stuff, the more average things, which does a lot of that sort of engine wheel. And then with a creative team and a deep analytics team at either side, and with some sort of AI orchestrator in the middle to make sure that AI engine is running properly, is not infringing data controls, is not lying about stuff, all those sort of things. It's working productively. And I think you need the deep technical expertise, because you need to have enough expertise to know what's working, what's correct, and what's incorrect. You can't just trust AI to do everything. Never be able to do that. And then on the creative side, because everyone will be using AI, the last thing you want to do is produce what everyone else is producing or make it feel like it is. So you need that creative engine to keep that going. And then to knit those things together is really critical. So I would say when you're thinking about how you develop your marketing team and your marketing function, I think it's great to really, a lot of the research seems to suggest that if you introduce AI across the whole organization, in terms of demystifying it, is probably the biggest win. Like, you don't have to train everyone to be AI experts, but you should train everyone to understand what it is, what its capabilities are, what its limits are, so that people feel more empowered to use it when appropriate. And that way you'll get a bigger amount of benefit. But I think at the moment, there's a lot of froth in terms of this AI activity. And I think just be sensible and stick to basic principles in terms of what's going to create value for you, what's going to make you stand out, what's going to enable you to align the business model to what you're doing day to day. And I think really focusing on that, I think is going to be really key in the next 18 months.
Another great advice. And creativity is the key. I think we touched upon at the start as well. So we have all the tools, all the information available.
Yeah.
But do you think AI will be able to replace our creativity?
Well, no, by definition it can't, because, well, not the LLMs anyway. Those models are based on mathematical prediction of the next thing in the line. So it's good at following instruction. It's good at condensing and summarizing. It's good at producing what an average person would produce. But as a marketer, I never want to produce an average piece of content. I never want to produce an average campaign. I always want to produce something that is exceptional. So I don't think I feel particularly under threat for that piece. So I think, focus on what it does well, which is the middle zone, and make sure you get the right specialists and the right people with talent and flair to do the rest.
Any last piece of ideas or frameworks to be different marketer or being stand out in the crowded market?
I think if you want to do great marketing, fundamentally you have to align the business strategy to the marketing activities. And that's the challenge, right? So it's not the same. People don't always speak the same language within each company. So a technical founder will speak differently to a CFO, to a marketing person, to a HR leader. Marketers touch all of these different aspects of the business. So my advice to most marketers these days is learn to translate between these different groups and learn to be empathetic to what they need to see the value of marketing. Because if they don't see the value of it, you won't get your budget next year.
Very important, and I think excellent advice to finish on. James, I really appreciate your time, your expertise. I think there's lots to learn from these suggestions. Where people can find out and connect with you to, if they need help with standing out with their marketing.
Yeah, so I have a website, standout.consulting, that you can have a look at. I've got a lot of my articles on there as well. You can get in touch or get in touch on LinkedIn. I'm also a keen photographer, so you can check out Creative Explorer on Substack, but that's more reflective. It's not really commercial. But so any of those places are fine.
Excellent. And we will put all these links in the show notes as well, so people can find you as well. Great. James, once again, thank you very much for your insights and sharing your marketing experiences.
No problem, Rana. Thanks very much. Appreciate the chat.
But that's it for this episode of the Website Growth Show. If you find it helpful, please consider subscribing. Until next time, keep growing.